7 sharp. So you already see the panelists in the screen, so you know who are going to give the presentations. And we just wait for people to come in. I can't see any names, I just see a number going up. And at the moment it is 65 participants, so we wait until people are there or have found a way to our webinar. Ah, there's Stine. Stine, who you can now see connecting to audio, will be our live performer this evening. We always do live music in our EUCOMS webinars. It gives good energy to the audience, and it's not just a cognitive process. And I had the luck already to listen to Stine and say this. She's a great performer. If you have any questions or comments, please use the chat for that with the number of participants. And also the fact that you're looking at the live stream, we can't have you on the screen, but the interaction can go via the chat. And Janella Petra will keep a close eye on what's happening in the chat. And we have a couple of presentations, as you may have seen from the program. And at the end, there will be 20 minutes for interaction. But if you have an immediate question to a speaker, a question for clarification, please put it on the chat. And also, in fact, I would invite you to write on the chat now who you are, so that we know who you are, and also maybe what's your connection to the theme, to peer support. And make sure that everything that is being said in the chat will be answered, will be commented on by us, but maybe not during the session. But we are a community. EUCOMS has a website, and the Peer Support Association of Norway is organizing this. So there are many ways to keep in touch. A meeting like this is more like a crystallizing point from where different initiatives and can start, and new connections around the globe can be made. It's 2 minutes past 7. See still people coming in, but I think we will start now, and we will see who more joins us. Is there already a new question before I start that I have to deal with Janella? Pardon?
Oh, is there any questions?
Yeah, is there a question that has to be dealt with before we can start?
Not yet, no.
Not yet. Okay, well, then I welcome you. Welcome to the 10th meeting of EUCOMS on peer support, and very important, one of the central themes and principles of the European Community Mental Health Services Network. My name is René Keat, and I will give an introduction to the theme. And my role is I'm the chair of the European Community Mental Health Services Network. And I will start sharing my screen for my opening presentation. So, as I said, this is the 10th meeting. EUCOMS has been around for many years already. And we have 6 principles that are the foundation of community mental health care. And one of those foundations is indeed peer support. So also that's why my speech was about peer support is the fundament of community mental health care and not an ornament. And very briefly, I will describe with you what these 6 principles of community mental health care are, as we in our network have described them. And first of all, it's about human rights. And for each perspective, we also have chosen a symbol. And this one is a book cover of a book already written in 1962, Asylums, that compares the situation of mental patients with that of inmates. And that, of course, is about human rights. So for us, the United Nations Convention on Rights of Personalities is a leading document, a leading principle for us how to organize the care. In fact, it's the foundation of all community mental health care, that human rights apply as much to people with mental health problems as to all other citizens. And in practice, that is not the case. So this is really something that we need to be active about, need to become activists about if we are not already that. The second principle is that of public health. You see here depicted as a map, in this case a map of Malaga, but could any place in the world. And the thing is that a mental health service not just serves mental health care to a group of patients, it is a part of a community, and it bears a responsibility for all the citizens in a catchment area. So it's a broader task than just providing care. That's the public health focus. And me, myself, I'm a psychiatrist, I've been trained as a medical doctor. I didn't learn that much about public health, and there should be more awareness of that perspective. The third one is recovery. And recovery, of course, started as a citizen rights movement of people no longer accepting that there are second-rate citizens because of having mental health problems. And that movement started with people telling their recovery stories. So that's how the term recovery, in fact, entered into mental health care. And it gave a focus on the goals, the talents, and the strength of clients who are in a service. The fourth, the picture you see is oil and vinegar, two things that you can mix. That's about, in fact, the combination of these recovery principles and evidence-based practices that are not of different worlds, but in fact can be blended together, like you can blend oil and vinegar together. The fifth is the principles of a network. Community mental health services work in a broader network. Mental health care is too big a topic just to leave it up to mental health care services alone. So you need a broader network, and that's also, it's important that mental health services have a network approach. And then the sixth principle, and that will be the principle of this evening, peer support. And for those who have not yet seen this, maybe first think for yourself, what am I really looking at now on my screen? You see some pottery, indeed, and you see that there's a crack in the pottery, and that crack has been repaired with gold. That's a Japanese tradition, kintsukuroi. For us, this is a symbol of peer support. There's a crack, something went wrong, but in the process of repair, you add value. And that will be the central theme of this whole evening. And as I said, it's a fundament. And this, in fact, means that there are, in approaching mental health, there are three sources of knowledge. One is science, the body of scientific knowledge. The other one is practice, and you get better in your practice by reading books, but also by having things like supervision, intervision, learning from each other. And the third source of knowledge is the lived experience of the peer experts, but in fact also of all professionals. So the way we've described it, and if you want to read it more in detail, go to our website, eucoms.net. You can find the whole document there. But in fact, then the patient becomes a co-creator of care. And that's the case at the individual level in the treatment. Therefore, we talk about support decision-making. At the system level, in which a peer expert is member of a team and has impact on the policy of that team, but also the policy level itself. So in the service, in the board of a service, the government, peer expertise has a place. And therefore also that's our way of dealing with this principle of nothing about us without us. And peer expertise, what is it really according to our vision? Is, well, you have an experience that can become peer knowledge, and that can become by training peer expertise. So a peer worker in a team needs training to have that role. But there's also the peer knowledge and the lived experience of all other professionals. And I think more openness of professionals sharing their lived experience is one of the things that professionals can do about stigma, about going away from the us and them. And how do we deal with the three different sources of knowledge during this evening? Well, we have different speakers, and we have speakers from across the globe. We have speakers from different countries in Europe, also from South Africa and from the USA. And for each speaker, we will say how there is a sort of blend and mingle of these different perspectives. And this first speaker that I like to introduce is Uda Hoylund, a peer support specialist and also member of the EUCOMS board. So I'll stop sharing the screen so that Uda can start sharing the screen. And what we will see in her presentation is in fact how the policy of a service, the policy of a team is influenced by the peer expertise and by the input of service users. And they've really done it in a very good and professional way. So Uda, can I give you the floor, please?
Thank you, Renee. Thank you for a great introduction, both to the principals and to me. I'm going to share my screen now. So just wait a second. There we go. I'm going to talk about a project that I'm leading in District Gamle Oslo, or District Old Oslo in Norway. This is a project that we are calling a service user panel. And it's located in District Gamle Oslo, or Old Oslo for people who don't speak Norwegian. And that's a pretty big district with above 50,000 residents. It's a very diverse district, but we have a lot of poverty and problems with mental health and substance abuse. I work there as a peer expert and a project manager for this project. And I can see that we need to involve the citizens in the district to a larger degree than we have done before. So before we used to have user involvement as, in a more traditional way. So we used to have surveys. We used to call people and ask them, do you think we are good enough? Do you agree with this statement? And questions that were really simple, but didn't really give us a lot to work with. And the involvement was really coincidental and more on an individual level. So what we saw were that people who were helping people one-on-one were quite good at involving the users, but not on the system level or at the policy level. So we thought that we need to start involving people who use our services to a larger degree. And we thought that instead of you have user organizations that are really important and that are really have pushed the boundaries all the time and given a lot of great information to the services, but we wanted to get to individuals who had used our services specifically. So we wanted to not go to the big organizations, but to the small people. So we wanted to start a panel with people who could meet over time, that we could ask about our services and how we could improve them, and then later come back and maybe ask the same questions or a bit different questions, so we could improve over time. And we wanted to be sure that we compensated these people fairly and paid them for everything that they did. And we were excited to try co-creation, and this project was supposed to be something that we made together. And me, I'm a sociologist, so I'm really, I think a lot about power and about power dynamics in the services. So what we wanted to do was to put the power back into the hands of the people that we are trying to help. And the goal is simply to make the services better for these people by employing their experiences. So I'm just going to say, Renee, could you tell me when I have 5 minutes left, because I can't see the time no more.
I will.
Thank you. So this started as an idea by me and Torbjørn Monhaugen, who is my colleague. So this idea was formed by 2 peer workers. And we got, first of all, we got some funding so we could try this out for a year. And now we've gotten funding for 2 years. And we were almost going to make a big mistake already starting the project, because we were making a plan. How can we recruit people? What is the project going to be? How is it going to look? And then we stopped ourselves and just, okay, but this is supposed to be co-creation. So we have to, we have to make these decisions with the people we are going to make this for. So then we started something we called a mini group, where we contacted the service users that had been in contact with us before and who had said that they wanted to contribute in some way. And we started having these workshops where we just talked about what should the boundaries and the outline for this project be, and how many people should be in it, and how should we recruit the people we want into the panel. And so we started recruiting for the panel in 2019, and we wanted the panel to be representative for the district, and by that we mean that it had to be diverse in almost every way, and we wanted to have people who had really different experiences, both good and bad, who could help us understand how the mental health services we gave them affected them. So we made flyers and posters and posted this all over the district together with the little mini group. We had an open meeting at the local library, and a lot of the people who came there that day and got coffee and cakes ended up being on the panel and have been on the panel for almost a year now. So we started kind of reaching out everywhere and getting our colleagues to talk to people, to ask everyone they met, would you like to be a part of this? This is paid work and you can get to talk about what you think about us. And what we did, we interviewed every interested person who wanted to be interviewed. Just had like 10 questions or something. And then Marius, who is somewhere here, was a part of the project. And we had, at the end, we had a group interview where we tried to see how will these people work together and will it be a good mix. And we finally landed on 10 panelists that now meet 2 times a month, approximately. So we were actually going to have about 6 or 8 panelists, but we couldn't decide. So we just went for all 10 of them. And my thinking was that every time I've been a part of a project like this, there's always about 3 or 4 people who say, no, that's not for me, after a few months. But this hasn't happened here, so we're still 10 people, but it's a really great dynamic, and it's good. Okay, so we we started up with meetings in March. Last March didn't go quite as expected. We were going to rent a big room and have coffee and food and just get to know each other, have a relaxed start. And this was the March 16th, so that didn't happen. So everything was closed down. We were sitting at home on our laptops, but we decided to go for it and try to have a digital meeting. So I feel like that was a critical point of the project, because it was really tempting to just say, okay, but then we'll wait. We'll just wait for this small epidemic to blow over and start up later. But we decided to go for digital meetings, and we called the participants and guided them through how to get into Zoom and how to do this, Renee?
5 minutes, Uda.
Okay, I'm going to hurry. But the great thing is that our first meeting was really spot on what the services needed, because they were wondering, how can we adjust to these new restrictions? So that was our first meeting, was discussing what's the important thing to keep and what's not so important, and how can you have contact with people in a digital way. So that was our first meeting, and after that we have had a lot of assignments from different parts of the services who ask us, how can we make this part of the service more user-friendly? How can this be better? If we want to reach young people, what can we do? These are the questions we have gotten. And then we meet for 2 hours and discuss it on the panel. And then we write an answer and send it to those who have given us assignments. And some of the assignments require us to work a bit beforehand, but that's not the usual way it goes. And we also have had a digital citizen meeting. We were really going to have an open meeting for everyone at the library. But yeah, we had to do it on our computers. But the theme was loneliness, and it was really spot on for the pandemic. And we had people coming in from who worked at the services and people who use the services and just interested people. And this is something we're going to do again and find a new theme and follow up on. So the panelists are saying that this feels like a meaningful job, and this feels like they are actually being taken seriously. And I didn't think of this as an empowerment project before I heard that, because we were thinking, how can we make the services better? But right now I'm thinking about the panelists are actually improving and having a good time and feeling like this is really meaningful. And I think getting paid for it and has a great symbolic value for the people involved. So the road ahead is continue to taking on assignments for at least a year. And we're going to start a research project with a Norwegian scientist. I've spot a tiny spelling error. But we are also going to evaluate the project with the panelists themselves, so that we can see how they feel their lives have been affected by being a part of this. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Uda. It's really great to see how you've done this, and now indeed an idea of, in fact, you want to strengthen the service, and you see the process strengthens also the users that are part of the panel. So that's really a sort of win-win situation, and unexpected positive side effect, you could say. They're very, very interesting. Yeah. We have space if there are any questions for maybe one question of clarification. We have time in the end for this discussion via the chat, but Jonella, are there any questions for Uda?
No questions. Lots of participants from perhaps the most diverse group of countries we ever had in a EUCOMS meeting. But no question yet. Okay. Congratulations passed on to Oda from one of the participants, and questions probably in the end.
Okay. Okay. Well, very good. So if questions do come up, please put them on the chat, and feedback is very welcome too. And I see there are many chats also already coming in. Junella.
Yes, we do have a question in the meantime.
Yeah.
The question is from Shuna Vanner. What are the reactions from the services you have supported?
They are very excited to get real information from the people who they're going to help, and at the same time I feel like the people who are working on kind of on the floor level are grabbing onto the information and trying to do their best to incorporate it. But the farther you get up in the system, the harder it is to get people to understand the information they are giving. So I think we have some work to do with kind of reaching the people who are further away from the service users.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Then we make a big global jump from Norway, one of the most northern countries of Europe, to the very deep south, not of Europe, but of the world. We go to South Africa. And it's very interesting that we have you here today, Charlene Sanko, because you are the CEO of a global network on peer support. So we see this is not just a USA or European thing, it has become global. And I think we can, being from the northern part of the world, learn a lot actually from the South and the global South perspective. So we're really happy to have you here, Charlene Sanko. If you can share the screen yourself at the moment you want to do, but I give you the floor now, Charlene.
Thank you very much. Very glad to be part of this important discussion. I think it's not one that happens really often in the global South. Let me just share my screen here. Right. Good. Yes, so I think it's morning, afternoon, and evening to everybody. It's nice to see so many participants from all over the globe. I'm just going to give a brief introduction to the Global Mental Health Peer Network. I think it's important to mention that we are 100% lived experience. So what that means is that within all our structures, from staff, volunteers, executive committee, our board of management, everybody has a lived experience. So we are basically an advocacy organization. Our focus is very much on that. And we international. So our global office is based in Johannesburg in South Africa. But I'll speak a bit later. So yeah, you can see, sorry, at the moment we are 3 staff members. This is just kind of a diagram to show that we have kind of various roles and responsibilities and also focus areas. Just to tell you a bit more, the peer network was actually officially launched in 2018, but we started full operations in January 2019. So our main focus has been since to develop global mental health leadership of people with lived experience, and secondly, to develop a sophisticated communications platform where people with lived experience are able to share their views, their opinions, perspectives, and of course their experiences. So as an international organization for and run completely by people with lived experience, and within our structure, we have a wealth of expertise. A lot of our representatives have different focus areas. For example, some focus on youth mental health, workplace mental health, maternal mental health. There's a wide range, and peer support is also among some of those skills. So on the organogram there on the right hand, you'll see this is basically the executive structure. We have lived experience representation from different countries. At the moment, we are represented in more than 30 countries globally. And then we have our regional executive committee, which is then based on the WHO world regions. Then we started recently developing the subcommittees. At the moment, we've established already a lived experience research subcommittee. We're now establishing a youth one, LGBTQ, as well as family and carer, because we feel that as a global organization, we need to be completely diverse and also bring those diverse voices to the forefront, of course. We also have which we recently established, is the honorary mentors. The idea about that is very much around empowerment. So the new representatives then are assigned on a mentor who kind of empower them and guide them through being like a global lived experience leader. Then we, of course, have our honorary members who have served a 2-year full term within the structure of the organization, and that's a lifelong membership. I'm going to dig in right into the issue of peer support. I just want to get these things out of my mind. Okay, so I think peer support work is especially important at this moment due to COVID. We have already seen a lot of impact on people's mental health as a result of COVID, both those with existing mental health conditions, where they might experience worsening of symptoms. But what we also see is people who had no previous history of mental health conditions and now developing new mental health problems. And we've seen a lot about developing depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress, of course. So this is really an opportunity because peer support can make such a difference. And especially with the demand in mental health services and especially support. Another opportunity, especially related to COVID, what we've seen also is a problem with human and financial resources, which has very much been directed or allocated to the COVID response. And we all know that mental health, especially in our middle-income countries, is a sector that's been quite neglected. So this places that sector particularly in crisis. So if we really apply peer support, especially in crisis situations like COVID and even post-COVID, it will help address mental health needs of people and also help alleviate the impact, both social and economic impact, as we've seen happening at the moment, and kind of prevent unnecessary suffering going forward. Sorry, come on. Okay, I just want to talk a bit about the obstacles of establishing peer support work in the global south, low middle income countries. But when I speak about these obstacles, I'm now specifically referring to peer-to-peer support, or what other countries or high-income countries would rather refer to as peer support specialists. Because in the global south, or even I can speak from South Africa and other countries, we do see people or kind of the existence of peer support groups, but I'll specifically now refer here to peer-to-peer support. First of all, I'm sure you all know of the value and the benefits of peer support. Even though the research and the evidence exist, unfortunately, in low and middle income countries, peer support is not yet recognized. Another problem is there's really little to sometimes no research in peer support work in low and middle income countries. And research and evidence is actually so important, especially in advocacy initiatives, and to convince governments and policymakers to incorporate peer support work in mental health service delivery and, of course, in policy. We also have a lot of existence of misperceptions and myths surrounding mental health conditions. People still have the tendency of perceiving people with mental health conditions, especially severe mental health conditions, as being violent, also often referred to as very discriminatory terminology like mad, lazy. We see quite often the belief that people are possessed by demons, that they need ritualistic interventions. Some of these practices are often harmful, of course, and violate quite a lot of human rights violations. In some countries, it still happens where people are tied to or chained to trees, for example, with the belief that that will cure them. And I think probably the most damning belief or perception is that people with mental health conditions or lived experience are incapable of positively contributing to society and, of course, the economy. Stigma and discrimination, which pretty much link into the myths and misperceptions, that impacts on the entire recovery process of a person and affects those who struggle with mental health problems to be empowered. Empowerment is a very important aspect, I feel, when it comes to overcoming all these obstacles and advancing people, and especially advancing peer support work. What we also see quite a lot is mental health care and treatment is very heavily focused on the biomedical model. So, for example, if you experience a problem, more often than not, the first point of entry will be to prescribe you medication or to hospitalize you. So there's no other forms of interventions or more focused on community type of services or support. Poor access to education is also quite a major problem, along with, of course, a lack of adequate information. And those are contributing factors that result in low mental health and human rights literacy, especially among the most disadvantaged people with lived experience, who are, of course, subjected to social and economic inequalities. I have done before a bit of a kind of a survey to kind of determine people's knowledge around human rights specifically, and the outcome was that more than around 80% actually were unaware of what human rights actually meant. So that's quite huge, and it's very important to actually, that actually links again in with empowerment. For some countries, we still see that, and I think I've experienced it physically in South Africa, where people tend to think someone with a mental health condition cannot be gainfully employed. And that also we find in the perception within the mental health workforce, where there's still not that acceptance that people with lived experience can actually be part of the mental health workforce. For example, the peer support and being part of teams, as was explained before. Another problem, of course, is there's no certified training programs for peer support work. I know in high-income countries there are. Unfortunately, as far as my knowledge exists, there's no training programs in the global south or low and middle-income countries. I think here and there are projects starting, but overall not. So considering that there are, of course, no regulatory body or a set of standards available for peer support. And then the last issue that I want to raise is, of course, peer support work is often not included into mental health policies or strategic plans. In South Africa, the phrases are there in our mental health policy. The words peer support is there and the word recovery is also there. But I'm not completely sure that it's fully understood. So if it's not fully understood, it cannot be actually implemented into practice. So how do we overcome these obstacles? Very important, again, linking to empowerment. We need to improve mental health and human rights literacy, and also further develop lived experience leadership. And that is also a very strong component of the Global Mental Health Peer Network. And once we have that, it will also advance advocacy initiatives to actually promote peer support work and make sure that it features within policy and practice. Secondly, we need to apply principles of meaningful and authentic lived experience engagement. And those principles I'm referring to is we as people with lived experience need to be seen as partners, equal partners. We need to be respected for our experiences and our views and perceptions and what we can contribute. And of course, then empowerment is also a very important principle. We also need to understand that there are individuals, and of course, often linked to stigma and discrimination and the lack of education, who are not that confident to articulate their views. And their views are also very important to give voice to advocacy initiative and to promote peer support. Stigma, of course, is a big one that we need to address. And I think the most important way, or most effective way, of course, of addressing stigma is recovery stories. I know there's a lot of evidence showing that recovery stories or contact-based education are pretty much effective in tackling stigma. Yeah, stigma, of course, has negative kind of aspects because it just slows down transformation of mental health care and services that should be based on evidence and benefits, and also promote a person-centered and recovery approach to mental health care. Restoring power imbalances, I think we still see a lot of that, and that comes into partnership. People with lived experience being perceived as partners and not the us and them phenomena. I know paternalistic practices in psychiatry has been in existing for quite decades, but I must admit that I personally have seen a big change in that there is a shift in that. And then also to activate and enhance pre-existing commitment to the values and principles of recovery, because peer support, of course, is known to be effective once those conditions are in place. The opportunities that we see to establish peer support work globally as a fundamental discipline in mental health, that is kind of what we want to see peer support being eventually, as a occupation, as a profession, as a valued and recognized profession. So the opportunities is that there are already global recognition of the importance of lived experience involvement, and that has really gained momentum. I think even especially in recent times, especially with academics, clinicians, researchers, as well as mental health organizations, that place the emphasis on improving the status quo through peer support systems and to improve service delivery. Another opportunity that I see is human resource constraints in mental health, especially in low and middle income countries. We do know that there is a huge gap in human resources. There's not enough mental health workers or professionals to really provide a high quality of service. And that, of course, is a place where peer support can add immense value to help close that human resources gap. COVID, of course, as I mentioned before, is also a good opportunity, especially to promote peer support, because there are and expected to will be a greater demand for mental health services and support, and peer support is a very good option, especially as we move towards more community-based services and support. And lastly,
can you wrap up?
Can I what?
Can you wrap up?
Yes, almost done.
President, yeah.
Yeah. Persons with lived experience, okay, as include us in policies, because policies are also important, and strategies to advance peer support. Just my final slide is the 3 key actions. What I see is how we can establish peer support's fundamental discipline is, first of all, to create a standardized accredited peer support training platform, which the Global Mental Health Peer Network aims to do, to develop standardized regulations for peer support work profession, and finally to establish an international regulatory body. And that is it from me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Charlene, for this very interesting perspective, indeed, from the Global South. If there's a question really for clarification, Janella, we could have time for one question.
We have a comment, and in fact, feedback to Charlene regarding one of the regarding the issue of competencies and building capacity of peer workers. We have a comment from Nanette Waterhaus from Hout from Netherlands, and she was mentioning that in their service within the European Erasmus project, they are building, they are working on competency issues for across EU for service users. So that's a comment back to Charlene. So perhaps it would be useful to connect. And otherwise, we have many requests for your presentation, and so for the previous presentation. So I hope that in the end we'll be able to disseminate all the presentations to participants.
Yeah, we will share them via our website.
We have additional, yeah, I have an additional comment coming from. Let's see if I can pronounce it right. Kaubab Al-Wadai, who is the founder of Bridges to Peace and Solidarity Initiative. And the question is, do you have any plan or collaboration with mental health organization in conflict zones in Middle East? And I believe he's coming from Yemen, if I remember.
She's coming from Yemen, I know. Hello, Kaukab, nice to have you on board here, and indeed good to connect. And Charlene?
Oh, is that a question?
Yeah.
Yes. At the moment, unfortunately, we do not have representation, but we're definitely looking. So it would be excellent if you could make connection with me so that we can also kind of collaborate in those areas. That would be excellent.
I'm happy about these questions and comments, because those two persons, I immediately thought they should be connected to Charlene, and that's already happening. That's the great thing. So we really have people from many countries, and we're glad that those people from Yemen here. So if there are more questions, etc., they will come in the end. We have 20 minutes at the end for interaction, and so keep on putting your questions on the chat. And as I said before, every question will be answered, but maybe not during this session, but we have many ways for ongoing connection. In fact, that's what we hope to reach, that a webinar like this is the start of an ongoing global community on peer support. And Charlene has really done very important work to make it a global thing. So thank you for that and sharing it with us. As said before, we have these 3 sources of knowledge: science, practice, and lived experience. And one theme for this evening is how they mingle, how they can be connected. And now if I go to the connection of science, of research, and lived experience, because I'm going to give the floor to Beverly Rose from the Netherlands, and who leads the User Research Center. Beverly.
Thank you. Well, now that you mentioned what I was gonna say, that was my presentation. But I will tell something about the User Research Center as well. First of all, my name is Beverly Rose. I'm from the Netherlands, and we have a network called the User Research Center, mainly busy in Holland, but also abroad. And it's a network for user researchers in mental health. We say, well, researchers are, if we are researching topics on the mental health issues, then we use the users as well, because we think these are the experts to help the organization and their members to improve the field of mental health. So that's why we have the User Research Center. And the connection with, with EUCOMS is, first of all, we are a network. So we are not a real organization, we are a network, and we are a network of 5 organizations working together in the field of mental health. And we would like to meet and share peer experiences like we do now for the different countries to improve the field of mental health, but also to learn from each other. And
can you maybe go to slideshow, Chuck and Beverly?
Pardon me?
Can you maybe go to the slideshow, diavoorstelling?
But then I can't see the next one. Anyway,
okay.
This is better for you. And now I get the translation as well. Do you as well?
Okay, then leave it the way you want. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, like EUCOMS and the User Research Center, we say, well, it's based on the Convention of the Rights of the Person with Disabilities, nothing about us without us. So if we talk about peer experts, then we use the expertise as well. If we talk about peer experts in Holland, we have a discussion, is it peer workers or is it about peer experts? Well, both names are used. It is from the psychiatric user movement, the activation activists. And we see that right now the number of peer workers is increasing, and even increasing that much that the government says, well, we have an agreement from 2019 to 2020 for more and better use of people with lived experience. So to more like a profession, and so more in amounts and as for the profession. Like Renee already said, we have the 3 levels when the patient of the client as a user is the co-creator for the treatment teams and the service governments. And what I will gonna say about the User Research Center is about the researches, the study we do on these 3 levels in the Dutch society. I will tell something about it later on. What we did for the national study for the User Research Center is to look at the development of the peer expertise, about the quality system for peer experts, to develop it in educational level, and the agree of the standards we use. It is the national study says we agree for the big study and the quality system. It is funded by the Ministry of Health. It is founded for the project of the User Research Center for the 2 years since last April 2020. So we have 1 more year to go. And the foundation of the peer experts in Holland, it's called VVED, is leading the study and the quality system. What are the challenges of the project for these 2 years? First of all, the increase of member of the foundation of peer workers. We guess there are about 2,000 peer workers in Holland, but for now we are not really sure. If we look at the foundation, we have about 500 members, And we see an increase of 20% in the last year. But we see the big challenge for the upcoming years is the fixed positions, but also the funding of the fixed positions. So there are a lot of peer workers around the country, and they're doing a great job. But a lot of them say, well, we don't get any money or we don't get enough money. So that's what we want to change. Also, what we will want to do is national networking and international networking for sharing experiences, because we say, well, a lot of countries have a lot of experiences, but the professionals go to seminars and go to training and go to courses, but a lot of peer workers don't yet, and we would like to change it. Besides, we would like to develop the professional role, including the needed training and education, talking about bachelor's degree, associate degree, but also master degree, up to a master degree at college level. So that's what we want to change. And we would like to see more cooperation, more acceptance between peer workers and, we say, other professionals, because peer workers are professionals, but peer workers and other professionals. Now you see there is a system world, an organizational world, and excluded peer workers, and would like to see more cooperation. If we go and look at the User Research Center and we talk about nothing about us without us, we would like to include the users in the researches we do in the study of users, because we say their knowledge is crucial. We see that researchers and users are not having the same questions. So researchers are educated to ask a lot of professional questions, but peers are asking different questions in their study or in a research. That's why, and well, Renee, you already mentioned it. And so if we focus on the sources of knowledge, we see three different kind of knowledges. Well, the first two kind of knowledges are quite familiar, but I would like to zoom into the third knowledge, the personal or experiential knowledge. When we talk about this expertise of peer experts, we talk about the personal experiences, the recovery of mental health problems, but also the addiction and other psychosocial problems. And there is some duality. And when you focus into what we do, we see these kind of extensional knowledge of recovery, like has to do with recognizing powerlessness, etc. And that is the point that we say the general researcher is asking other questions from their backgrounds compared to the peer workers or peer experts. So there can be a difference and also a difference in understanding. And the difference in understanding is the paradox, and I recognize it by myself. I'm the one who is a paradox myself, because like me, I am trained in university not to talk about my issues. So everybody's got issues, but when you have mental health issues, you are not gonna talk about it. Especially when you work together with clients. And now you see there is more openness. but there is some feeling about, well, it is still a little bit shameful. It is about failing. It's about powerlessness, exclusion. So there is some reservation. I am trained to keep my professional distance. And when I open up and I use my professional distance, and I use it in a way to do more experiential research, and I invite the clients to do the same, I have more effort and more results. But it's a paradox. It's getting used to the way to do it. How can we use the peer experts or the users in research? Well, first of all, well, Uda, you mentioned this as well. You have the panel and the focus groups, etc. So you have the clients. As a co-researchers, I use them a lot. We use them as experts, but it is difficult to epistemic justice and validity to prove, and also to convince other people that peer experts can be researchers. At least I have to convince a lot of people. Several types of researches, quantitative, qualitative, but also the art-based. I will, well, for the time, I will go especially to the last one, the art-based research. That is what we experienced last year mainly. Let me see. If we go to the art-based research, then I can give you an example how we can use the peer experts. Like this one, and now I got this one. This is one picture, and the picture is drawn by interviewing the peer experts. Then we ask the focus group, what do you see if you see this picture? And what we said when we asked this this question, I heard, and I'll read it. We see order and chaos. We see shame and pride. The poles are connected with an existential rubber band. What we see in these pictures is something we don't really see in the researches, because researches are a lot of times verbal. And this is a non-verbal way to get some more information about the clients, how they feel, what they think, what they want, what can help, etc. This is also an interesting one. This is the one drawn by the information of clients. We are free birds, but we know about suffering and exclusion. We don't like the pecking order. We are critical of the hierarchy in healthcare systems. Some of us therefore want to work outside the system. We are off the street, but the system is still there. It remains. We are also looked down upon, even though we go everywhere. This is how some peer workers in our study look at their organization and look at the other professionals in their organization and the role they have compared to the role of the professionals. Another one, peer experts say about this picture, we need to exchange with each other. As a peer expert, you often work solo. We need each other very much because we understand each other deeply. We come from a cold and dislocated area. We have struggled out of that. Sometimes that struggle returns and we have to get out of the cold again. Our expertise is also to keep in touch with these areas, with the cold and warm areas. We know where we come from, but we don't want to go back to it. We can move into new areas together. We have to hold each other. And the last one is about how peer experts see the future. We know passion hours. We work from a fire that burns inside. We are less guided by the clock, but we also work in a system, a square. The fire is called love by some of us. Necessity also seems to be felt, sometimes out of anger. We will feel cold and driven. The fire determines time. We are also a butterfly who wants to be free. The fire and freedom can also burn you up. The vulnerability of unpaid or less paid work. This is peer experts who see each other in the near future if the things in Holland don't change soon. They say we have a lot of passion hours, but we don't get a lot of money. And it stops one moment. Even when we look at the organization and especially when we look at the other professionals. And that's why in Holland, we have to do a lot of work to professionalize the peer workers and their role.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very, very much, Beverly. Quite impressive. That's how you integrated with art and art-based research. In fact, I recently learned about it. It's beautiful how you explained this. Janella, is there a question for Beverly Rose? We could have one question before we go to the live music.
We have a comment from Tor Helge Tjelda on the value of doing research, which is user-led, and he particularly mentions the user ask user approach, which is of course very helpful and leads to more accurate information. Let's see, otherwise, positive comments about the presentation, but I do not see a question. And if I miss any question, because there are a lot of chats, I will bring them up in the final session of discussion.
Okay. Well, the end of Beverly's wonderful presentation was a perfect bridge to the next part, because in our community of community mental health, there's always room for art in our programs, especially live music. And we already see Stine Dahl Johansen ready by her keyboard. So welcome, Stine. And I was lucky already could listen to you, and then we agreed you would introduce yourself to the audience. Please, Stine.
Yes, hi. My name is Stine Dahl Johansen. I am a peer supporter from Oslo, Norway. I was asked by Marius a few days ago to perform today, and I'm very excited to do so. I am what is viewed as a young peer educator, so I'm 20 years old. I started being a peer supporter for about 3 years ago. And I work mainly with outreach work towards at-risk youth in the city center of Oslo. I'm also participating in some projects all around Oslo, and also some national projects and organizations. So that's really exciting. I will present 2 songs for you guys, which 2 songs that mean something to me, and hopefully you will enjoy them. The first one is called Youth by Daughter, and it's firstly perceived as sort of a lost love song, a breakup song, but in my opinion, it's about losing people you love. Either it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a mother, father, anyone that you hold dear to yourself, and even losing yourself at times. I think it's easy, especially now in these pressuring times with the virus and everything. It's easy to lose yourself, especially when you're struggling with mental health. So here is the first song, Youth. Shadows settle on the place that you left. Our minds are troubled by the emptiness. Destroy the middle is a waste of time. From the perfect start to the finish line. And if you're still breathing, you're the lucky one. Because most of us are eating through corrupted lungs, setting fires to our insides for fun, collecting names of the lovers that went wrong, the lovers that went wrong. We are the reckless, we are the wild youth, chasing visions of our future. One day we'll reveal the truth. Glory gets there. And if you're still bleeding, you're the lucky one. 'Cause most of our feelings, they are dead and they are gone, setting fire to our insides for fun, to distract us so forever, missing them. Collecting pictures in the thought that wrecked our hearts. It was the thought that wrecked this. You caused it. You caused it. You caused it. I lost it all. I'm just a silhouette. A lifeless face that you so forget. My soft and from the words you left, ringing in my head when you broke my chest, ringing in my head when you broke my chest. And if you're in love, then you are lucky, 'cause most of us are better over someone, setting fire to our insides for fun, to distract our hearts from ever missing them. But I'm forever missing you. You caused it. You caused it. You caused it. Yeah, so that was Youth by Daughter. It's been a song that I love for a very long time, and it means a lot to me, and helped me get through loss, and also with when I'm feeling down. So now I'm going to move over to the second song, which is kind of a recent love for me. It's from a musical called Dear Evan Hansen, about a guy that is not fitting really well in at school, and he makes up this story about there's a guy that recently died of suicide at the school, and he makes up a story that he was his friend, even though he wasn't. And this is before all that happens, but he just feels very invisible, and whenever he speaks, he does it wrong. He's very awkward, and he feels like he can't do anything right. And I think all of us have had that feeling some time in our life, or all the time, for that matter. So this is a song that's very dear to me. It's a recent obsession, and I hope you enjoy it. I've learned to slam on the brake before I even turn the key, before I make the mistake, before I leave with the worst of me. Give them no reason to stare, no slipping up if you slip away. So I've got nothing to share, no, I've got nothing to say. Step out of the sun if you keep getting hurt. Step out of the sun because you learn. On the outside, always looking in, will I ever be more than I've always been? Cause I'm tapping on the glass, waving through window. I try to speak, but nobody can hear, so I wait around for an answer to appear while I watch people pass, waving through a window. Can anybody see? Is anybody waving back at me? We start with stars in our eyes. We start believing that we belong, but every sun doesn't rise, and no one tells you where you went wrong. Step out of the sun if you keep getting hurt. Step out of the sun, you learn. Because you learn. On the outside, always looking in, well, ever be more than I've always been. Cause I'm tapping on the glass, I'm waving through the window. I try to speak, but nobody can hear, so I wait around for an answer to appear while I watch people pass. I'm waving through the window. Can anybody see? Is anybody waving? When you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? When you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? When you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? Did I even make a sound? Did I even make a sound? It's like I never made a sound. Do I ever make a sound? On the outside, always looking in, but never be more than I've always been. Cause I'm tapping on the glass, I'm waving through the window. I try to speak, but nobody can hear, so I wait around for an answer to appear while I'm watching people pass, waving through the window. Can anybody see? Is anybody waving back at me? Is anybody waving Thank you so much for letting me perform. It was really nice and a very new experience for me. So I'm so happy to be here and very interested to hear all about this. So thank you so much.
Likewise. Well, thank you for being with us, Stine. Thank you very, very much. And 20 years and over the years of experience in peer expertise and also musician. So we really, you brighten up our webinar. So thank you very much. And with Stine, we were back in the Nordic part of Europe. In fact, we stay in that part, but go a little bit south to Denmark. And Emma Sørgaard there, leader of the Danish Peer Network. So Emma Sørgaard, can I give you the floor, please?
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. So my name is Emma Sørgaard, and I come from the Peer Network in Denmark. And I'm here today to talk about peer workers in Denmark and the recent development here. And I want to start off by saying that I recognize a lot of what the other speakers have been saying. So it seems very obvious to me that a lot of the things that peer workers are facing are the same across borders. And maybe some of my points today you can also recognize from the earlier talks, which I think is it's an interesting point. So I'll just share my screen. Here we go. Yeah. Yeah. So just to present myself a little bit further, I have been working as a peer support worker at a hospital in Copenhagen for 4 years, and now I am working in the peer network of Denmark, and our work is to try to keep track of what's going on in this field in Denmark, and also to work to further develop the position of the peer workers in the country. So I'll talk a little bit more about the network, but mostly I just want to give sort of an overview of what's going on in Denmark right now. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. So I put down some of the key developments that have been going on for the last year in 2020. In Denmark, we have had peer workers in the form that we have today for about maybe, I think, about 8 years, around 2013, in the public mental health sector. They started up the first sort of projects, trying out which models to use and experimenting a little bit. And then it's become a bit more common and it's developing, but we're still at a point where it's very new to most people in Denmark, I would say. So, but we've come a long way from these years that it's been going on. But I just want to look back 1 year to look at 2020 to say that which kind of development there's been. So in 2020, we had the last region of Denmark. In Denmark, we have 5 regions, and last year in 2020, the last region actually hired their first peer workers. So I think that's a really big deal actually for us that now it's spread out throughout all of Denmark, and this last region, which is northern Jutland, you see the blue area up here, so more of a rural area. They hired the first 7 or 8 or maybe 9 peer workers, and they got a really good start with that. And then another thing that happened is that the capital region in Denmark, which is the red area you can see over here, I think you can see on the screen, in that region, the administration, they plan to double the number of peer workers, which I think it's really great to have so many new peer workers come in. So that's from, I think there were around 60 peer workers, and they want to have another 50 hired in 2021. And then another development that I've been seeing for the last year is that peer workers get more specific roles. So it's not just oh, maybe we should have some peer workers in mental health, but in certain sections. So something like the youth services now are interested in getting young peer workers, like we just saw Stine, people who are young and who can understand young people's problems better. And I think it's really great that it's also expanding like this. And then we also see that the Danish municipalities are getting interesting or getting engaged in hiring peer workers. They start off different projects, trying out how to figure out how can we use peer workers. So I sense that there's a lot of interest in this field, and more people are getting aware of it, and are employing or engaging volunteer peer workers. Yes. And what will the future bring? Well, for this year, I think we are looking at further expansion in the field. What has been going on for the last year, I think, will continue now. So we are hoping that the future in Denmark will bring even more jobs for peer workers that can be, especially in the municipalities. In Denmark, the region, they have the hospitals and the sort of the treatment for mental health problem, and the municipalities have more of the rehabilitation and the resident support. So that's a really big area to have more peer workers in the taking jobs there. And then we're hoping also to see not just an expansion in numbers of peer workers, but also an expansion in which kind of roles the peer workers can take on, so that it's not so that it's not only one kind of role. It won't be defined as being a certain thing, but that we can use this experienced knowledge in several kind of roles, such as using in management or in science and research, as Beverly just talked about. We can use it in education. We are hoping to start up some projects also with the colleges that have the educations for social workers and nurses and what's it called? People who work in different social fields. Yeah, so we're really hoping that it won't just, that the peer role won't just be fixed for one thing, but can expand into to all sort of areas. Yeah. And then the slide says power balances, and it's because I also want to address some of the problems that are arising with peer workers, because we're really happy that this field with the peer-to-peer is expanding so much, and we see a big interest. But of course, I also have we in the peer network have some concerns about how it is developing, and I think my concerns that where I put this header power balances is some of the same things that some of the other speakers also talked about. I recognize a lot of Charlene's concerns in this area. A difference is that here in Denmark, which is a high income country, we have actually broken through to the hospitals and to the social services, so that peer workers can get a job there, which is really great. But we also still have some of these problems that we still have an unbalanced power. And one of the problems is that the wages for peer workers are generally very low. And sometimes the terms of employment are not very good. Well, generally in Denmark, we have very good terms of employment, but we see for peer workers, sometimes it's not as good as for other jobs. So that's a big problem we're seeing. And in the peer network right now, we're trying to get a better idea of what are the actual terms out there. So we're doing some questionnaires and interviews to find out, to get a better grip on this problem. Another power unbalance, maybe I should have put unbalance in the header, but that would be the hierarchies we see. A hierarchy of knowledge. I think it's really great today that Renee is talking so much about these three kinds of knowledges, in both in the scientific knowledge, the practical knowledge, and the experiential knowledge, because we see a lot that the experiential knowledge is not valued as much as the other kind of knowledges. And I think it's because it's still new, and people are used to focusing on the scientific knowledge, the theoretical knowledge, and practical knowledge is very familiar. But talking about knowledge by experience is still new. So we're seeing that it's not really being acknowledged as real knowledge, maybe, and also. There's a culture at the hospitals, I would say, that is still a bit old-fashioned, that we have hierarchies, and I experienced this myself working for 4 years at a hospital, that there are some very harsh hierarchies at, for example, at a hospital where the doctors are, of course, high up in the hierarchy, and then the nurses, and you have other social workers, and to be a peer worker in that hierarchy is pretty difficult, because since you're the new one coming, you're usually put down in the bottom, which I think is problematic, because the knowledge of experience and the insights of the peer worker should be valued more. So that's an unbalance there. And then peer workers are usually being hired as the only one in a team. In Denmark, we imported the FACT team that some of you might know from Holland, which is a community treatment model. And it's great that it got imported to Denmark, because it means that there should be a peer worker in each team. So we got a lot of peer jobs from that, but the peer workers are still often working as the only team member, the only one in the team or in the section, and that's difficult, because it means that the voice of the peer worker is not very strong, because if you're alone and saying what you're saying, it often isn't heard, or it's too difficult to get through with what you want to say.
Emma, you have 2 more minutes.
Okay, so I have to hurry. Okay, so I think to wrap up this with the power unbalances, there's still some kind of tokenism in how peer workers are being seen in this very big system in public health. And we do want peer workers to be acknowledged for their knowledge and for their insights and their important contributions to the work, and not just for being a symbol of hope, which is, I think, is a very passive role to get. So to wrap it up, what are we working for in the peer network? We want to develop some kind of peer professionalism, like some of the previous speakers talked about, to make sure that peer workers can come out and be self-confident and feel empowered in the role as peer workers, and not be unsure and uncertain and alone in the team, because peer workers need to have an important and strong voice to really break through and not just be a symbol, but be an actual change. And then I'm also really hoping that this movement of peer workers and peer workers breaking through and being a part of the public mental health services can keep on being a critical movement, and not just becoming a nice thing to have in the social sector, but also keep pushing and keep developing the services and keep making them more user oriented and getting users more involved. Yeah, so that was it from me, and thank you so much for letting me present here, and everyone is always welcome to contact me, and you have my contact information here. Thank you.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much, Emma, for sharing the Denmark perspective with us, and also being from the Netherlands. Glad to hear on the positive impact of the flexible service community treatment model. That indeed in the model it says you should have a peer expert in your team. So apparently that helped you to get the movement going. And I really like your plea for more activism here. Janella, is there a question for Emma?
Yes, we have a couple of questions. One of
select one.
Yes, one of it is partly answered, so we understand that the peer workers are paid. The second question was linked to that: who is paying them? So who is the payer?
The payer is well, like I said, we have the 5 regions of Denmark, and they have their administrations taking care of hospitals and community treatment, like the FACT. And so the regions are paying, and the region that is publicly funded. And it's the same with the municipalities, it's also publicly funded.
Right, so are the local authorities that are paying for these peer workers, or are the hospitals?
I think that would be the same thing in Denmark.
All right. And the second, do we have time for a second question, René?
No, not for now. Leave them to the end, so we can ensure that we do right to all the speakers. But we will have time in the end for more questions. So keep posting your questions and remarks on the chat that we can use in the last 10 minutes. But now we go, let's say good morning to Lisa St. George, and who has come from Arizona, but I think you're now speaking from California, to share the story about Recovery Innovations. In fact, I have visited the Recovery Innovations in Phoenix, Arizona, and for me that was really a life-changing experience. So I learned really a lot there. So I'm really glad to have you here with us, Lisa St. George. Can you take the floor, please?
I gotta unmute myself.
Yeah, there you are. Okay, welcome.
It's lovely to be with you all today, and thank you for your wonderful presentations and the music and everything. It's been really nice. Let me just share my screen. And let's see, can you see my PowerPoint?
We can see your PowerPoint.
Because I can't.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
Could you try to do the backup?
Otherwise, yeah, we have a backup of the PowerPoint. So if you can stop sharing the screen and maybe start introducing yourself. And meanwhile, Marius will bring your PowerPoint.
Oh, thanks. That'll help me
in
a
a way
lot.
they can see, but you have to stop sharing your screen first, Lisa. Yeah, wonderful. So we see. Yeah.
My name is Lisa St. George, and I am trained as a master's level social worker, but I have been working from the peer perspective for the past 20 years and working with Recovery Innovations, now called RI International. And we have been at the forefront of peer support in the United States, one of the first organizations to hire large numbers of peer supporters. And so it's been a wonderful journey, and I've been working on that, you know, for the last 20 years in different states and different countries. And I hope that, I know that lots of you are in the beginning of this, but I know that it will make a huge difference in your services. And as soon as the systems of care start to feel it, things will begin to change. So is there a way for me to move it, or are you going to move the slides for me, please?
Just let me know when you want to change. I will
go ahead and change. So in the United States, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is the organization in the country, the federal organization that identifies jobs in the country, they don't recognize peer supporters right now. And they wrap us up in something called community health workers. And in 2016, there were 51,900 community health workers. At RI, by 2016, we had trained 9,856 peer support workers across the United States and internationally. And by the end of 2016, in December, by the end of 2020, we had trained 14,420 peer supporters. So we have been doing this a long time with many, many people, and have just seen amazing things happen when peer supporters come into systems of care in enough numbers to be felt by those systems of care. The wages in the United States range from $8.65, which is minimum wage, to $16.50 per hour in general, with most people earning about $13 to $13.50 per hour. And we consider that a poor rate of pay. So there's a lot of advocacy going on around right now to increase the pay rate for peer supporters. At RI International, we always start peers at $13.50 an hour. And we have never used peer supporters as volunteers, because we have always believed that they have a valuable contribution to make, and they should be paid. And they should be paid appropriately, as much of a living wage as possible. And sometimes funding rates of different programs get in the way of that. But we have people in our organization who, because we have a career ladder for peer supporters where they don't have to stop being a peer supporter to have a supervisory role or increase in their position, our peer supporters go all the way up to $125,000 or more per year, with most earning between $35,000 and $50,000 per year. And that's a strong living wage in the United States. Next slide. So it's valued, peer support is valued in mental health systems across the United States now. When I started doing this 20 years ago, people did not know what peer support was. And I was not always greeted with kindness when I was talking to organizations and systems about what we were doing. But in 2008, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration of the United States, which is attached to our Health and Human Services, identified peer support as an evidence-based practice. And things like cognitive behavioral therapy are evidence-based practices. And so for peer support to be identified as an evidence-based practice made a huge inroad for us in the value being recognized across the United States in many organizations and systems. Now it's covered as a Medicaid billable service, and Medicaid is the payer system for people with low income in the United States to get medical care. And so when peer support became recognized by Medicaid, then systems of care that served the public population of, and typically people with serious mental health challenges, are in that system, that Medicaid system. It allowed for peers to be able to bring down funding for their position for each time they served an individual. What that did was create a funding stream for peer support. Before that, people had to get grants, or states had to give money to an organization if they had peers, because there was no way to pay for the peer services. And so now we have this system where peers can bring down that funding for the services that they provide. And one thing that's a barrier still is that peers have to be employed by a non-government organization or government organization that's a recognized service provider and licensed, so they can bill Medicaid for their services. And next slide. What that means is that peers cannot work without supervision. And so, in other words, we can't go put a shingle out on our door and say, we're open for business and it's just us. However, there are peer supporters who are running, for instance, peer respite centers or peer warm lines, and they are accessing grant money, specific money designated to them by the state. So those organizations that are not pulling down Medicaid dollars can work without that Medicaid funding. But if you're going to invoice Medicaid, you have to have licensed providers on that team to oversee your work. Next slide. So at RI, we have peer supporters working in every service that we have. So we have 60 programs across the United States, New Zealand, and Australia. And we have many, many parts of our organization that are just peers working in different programs. And then we have many, many services that we have that are clinical services, where we have peers working side by side with doctors and therapists, and they are considered as vital a part of that team as a doctor is. And in our crisis centers, which is where people come to receive services in their worst moment, we are working hard to help people stay out of long-term hospitalization. So we want to care for them in the most holistic way possible. And part of that is employing peers in those teams in crisis centers to support people through those challenging moments. And they work right alongside the nurses and doctors to help people. And we have found it to be so effective that we've given it a name, and we call it Fusion. And it's sort of like the oil and water that was presented at the start. It just stuck with me that that's very similar to what we're talking about. Because in Fusion, you're trying to make things that don't usually go together merge. And so like oil and water, we want to merge these services together, because one without the other, we found, is not as effective. So we highly value peer support. And our team right now is about 1,800 strong, and 2/3 of our staff are people working from their lived experience. So even now, if we hire a doctor, we prefer to hire a doctor who has lived experience. If we hire a nurse, if she has lived experience, for us, that's like a huge bonus to us, because we find that people work from a different part of their heart when they have that lived experience on board. Next slide. So I talked about the crisis services, which are 23-hour crisis intervention, where we try to help people go right back to the community so they don't lose their housing, they don't disrupt their life completely with a 2-week or 2-month stay in a hospital when it's not necessary. And we also have attached to that a peer-run short stay, which we call the living room. And we call it the living room because what do we do when we have a cold? We hunker down on our couch in the living room with a blanket and a pillow. And so we created a living room to be that comfortable place. And that is full of peers. We have crisis respite that is peer run, housing and homeless programs that are peer run, transitional housing programs that include peer supporters and clinicians working side by side, outpatient traditional kinds of services like counseling and case management, and wellness city education centers, all of these fused with peer support, working alongside other team members, all valued. And then our training and consulting is providing peer trainings throughout the country and the world. So it's been a beautiful thing to see the rise of peer support in many different locations. The other thing that we found that peers are really, really helpful with is when someone's had to stay in the hospital or in jail, and they come out to the community, peer supporters are really helpful in that transition out of the hospital. And so it's just been amazing. Next slide. So in the United States, in order to bill Medicaid, you have to be 18 years of age or older. But there are many places that are hiring what we call transition age youth, which is that age from about 16 to 25 as youth peer supporters. And we also have a training to train them because they have a little different perspective on the world. And so we developed a training for them. They have to have a high school diploma or what we call a general education diploma, which means they completed the core studies that would be in a high school. They have to have a training. And we are one of many trainings in the United States that train peers, but we are one of the oldest. Our training is in its 6th edition. It's extremely robust. And right now in the United States, in order for peers to work, they have to have a certification. And only certain trainings are accepted for certification. That's a quality thing, to keep the quality of the training high enough so that people learn the skills that they need to know to do this work. And we meet those standards in many states. I think it's 21 states, and we've trained in all 50 states, and just currently some states have their own training that they provide. Next slide.
We have two more minutes, Lisa.
How many?
2 more minutes.
Okay. So our training was developed in 2000 in its 6th edition. And I talked about where we presented. And it's also the training that the Veterans Administration in the United States uses, which is a huge honor for us because many of our veterans come home with trauma. And so we've trained many, many peers. And in 2017, we were asked by the US Marine Corps and Semper Fi, which is their supporting organization, to train 80 Marines to assist with the high risk of Marine suicide in the United States. And so we were honored to do that. Next slide. And the training is unique because it's developed from peer supporters, and it was continually upgraded and updated through what we observed for all of those workers who are on our teams, what they needed to know, how they worked, what kind of services did they provide, and what in all the different places that they were working. So it's been developed through that lived knowledge of understanding peer support. Next slide. So that's all I have to say today. And I just want to thank you for your attention. And my number's there, my email, and please feel free to connect with me. And I know you guys, this is going to be great when we're everywhere in huge numbers, taking over the world in a very peer supporting way.
Well, thank you, Lisa. It's really good to hear your story. I've been in Arizona 8 years ago, and I see that you've even further developed it. And it was really, as I had a remarkable experience in the middle of this enormous desert. You have this big town, and but it was really like an oasis indeed. It really does exist, you know, fully run by people with lived experience, having crisis service, home service, admission, wellness center. And also all its emphasis on recovery is hard work, and what are you going to do about it? How can we support you on it? So I was quite impressed also by your story. It was a hard task for me, of course, this evening to keep the time. with all these wonderful presentations. Now I'm going to even harder task to Jonella to select maybe 2 or 3 questions, and that's the strength of the moderator. Which questions did you select, Jonella?
Well, first, should I give a chance to our last speaker to answer one question addressed to her? So one question on supervision from Roku Slopik. What are the qualifications and education that supervisors of peer workers should have?
So we have a training that we've developed years and years ago, and of course continually updated, to train people to be supervisors for peer supporters who either are peer supporters, or if they're not, to help them to understand the role of peer support and be able to supervise them appropriately and not pull them away from their gifts and contributions that they make that are so unique. One thing that we know can happen when you have a supervisor who is not understanding the peer role fully is that they can actually try to remold the peer into a clinical kind of a framework if that's their training. And that is diminishing the gifts that a peer support brings to the team.
Thank you. A question to Oda pending from the previous session from Annette Fournemont. I hope I pronounce it right. What are the services doing with the information you provide as the panel?
So what we know is only short term, of course, because we've only been doing this for a year. But we know that some of the assignments we've had has been set in motion quite fast. We had some suggestions to some of the services to how they should organize things, and that changed immediately. But we also have had some assignments that were kind of long-term that we probably won't see the results from until maybe next year or in 2 years. But what happens with the suggestions we give is that they are sent back to the people who are giving us assignments. And usually we have like a follow-up meeting where we discuss the suggestions that came from the user panel and kind of see how is this fitting with what kind of resources you have. And yeah, so we think that they are being taken seriously, but the long-term results is still, yeah, we don't know.
Thank you very much, Ola. I would like to summarize some of the questions, and I was very pleased to see the very active discussion we have in the chat this evening. One topic that is clearly in everybody's mind is the topic of training and competencies for the peer workers. And there are a lot of comments on that. Some of our participants shared links. We have a link for a program in Spain from Evelyn Housing, or peer-to-peer. We have information about other such programs in different countries. And a question that I would like to raise coming from Tor Helge, and similar to something that also Shuna has asked and partly answered by Oda in the chat. What are the experiences and opinions on double competence, academic and lived experience? What is necessary? When is it necessary to have both and when not? And if you have any examples. And that's an overall question to the panelists because this issue has been addressed by many of you who would like to answer that. I do not see any hand.
I'll take it.
Lisa, yeah.
So, you know, in the United States, people just have to have a high school diploma. And one of the reasons is because when people have had a mental health challenge, sometimes it really came upon them when they were in university. And so they maybe never had the chance to finish. And so we've been trying to make sure that the training that people get to be able to enter the field is of a high caliber and meets the competencies that are required and necessary for peer support workers. I think that they can go on and get their education impact. We've had many peer workers who've gone on, but at this point in time, there's not very many universities that have any classes that would be specific to peer support. So that's an area that's open. But I think that if we create a lot of educational barriers for peer supporters to enter the field, we will actually create a barrier for peer support to be able to grow. And so to let people enter, get back to work, recover, because they get benefits from working. It helps them greatly and they feel useful and valued, we do. And so people can go on and go forward, but we don't want to create barriers from people to be able to enter the field, because when your systems of care go, aha, we need those people, you don't want to have something slowing down the process of getting people working.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we have to
Okay.
To close the session, Janella, because it's almost 9 o'clock Central European time, and but I understand there are many more questions. So let's keep the conversation going, and but then on our website, because we brought together many networks this evening. Also, there will be another opportunity. Maybe you can show that, Marius, for EUCOMS. We can see each other again in Antwerpen, because there will be a meeting then of the European Reserve Outreach Foundation, and the day before we have a tradition that we meet on location. If Corona allows it, we will meet anyhow, but maybe by then again on the same location, so see you there. But let's not wait until that moment. We have the network of EUCOMS, we have the URC, the Research Center, the peer network of Denmark, the network of Norway, the Recovery Innovations, the Global Mental Health Peer Network. We would like to make our presentation available for all those networks, so you can put the recordings on your different websites, and let's see this as a community of practice on peer support, which is indeed peer support, but it's also about art, it's also about research. And it's across the globe now. We have seen that this evening. So I thank you very much to all the speakers for the presentations. I thank all the attendees for the lively interaction via the chat. And I see that there are also connections being made. That's what I always like, because then it's like the corridor at a conference place that you can also meet each other and extend your network. So it is 9 o'clock. We will stop the session here, but our work goes on. Thank you very, very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you, bye.